Hello, everyone. My name is Allison Barney, and I am going to be presenting on the evolution of antibiotic resistance. And so, to start off, just to give you all a quick intro, bacteria are all around us. They are everywhere. They're in the food we eat, in our digestive tracts, and the lining of our mucosal membranes. And they're a big key factor in helping our bodies maintain homeostatic functions. However, they do inevitably cause disease and infection. And when Alexander Fleming discovered penicillin in the early 1900s, it kind of cascaded this idea of the creation of antibiotic drugs. The creation of antibiotic drugs and the use of them more frequently became the concept of the concept of antibiotic resistance, because the bacteria were outsmarting the drugs and evolving. And so the objective of this research is to educate you all about the evolution of antibiotic resistance and to offer solutions of how pharmaceutical companies and we as humans can decrease the rate of bacterial evolution from occurring. And so just a quick review of how bacteria can evolve. These are just a couple of the ways: vertical gene transfer and horizontal gene transfer. And horizontal gene transfer has the three ways: transformation, conjugation, and transduction. And transformation involves bacteria receiving DNA from the outside environment. Conjugation, bacteria directly transfer genes to another bacterial cell. And the third way, transduction, in which bacterial viruses move genetic information of bacteria into a separate bacterial cell. And so there's different ways they can evolve, and all of these are obviously very detrimental to drug therapy. So just kind of, I just explained the mechanism of bacterial evolution, how antibiotic resistance occurs, but the why it occurs is mainly because of abuse of antibiotics. It's becoming more prevalent because they're being abused. And in the US, antibiotics are abundantly prescribed, and I'll show you a map in this next slide that portrays that point. And on a worldwide scope, antibiotic abuse is a greater concern. There's lack of regulation is an issue. There's prescription, or excuse me, there's a lot of countries where prescriptions aren't required for antibiotics. You can just get them over the counter. They're cheap, easy to access. Another reason is inappropriate prescribing, which is kind of a double negative, because the patient probably won't recover from the illness, and they're being exposed to the possible development of antibiotic resistance. And the last one, extensive agricultural use. Antibiotics are a lot of times given as growth supplements for livestock to prevent infection, as well as stimulate growth, like I said. And these antibiotics are ingested by the humans when we consume their products. And even if we're not consuming animal products, the animals excrete up to 90% of the antibiotics via their urine or stool. And so, and then this spreads through the fertilizer, groundwater, surface runoff, etc. And this map was kind of illustrating that point about how they're abundantly prescribed in the US. And in some states, more antibiotic prescriptions are prescribed in the population, which is crazy if you think about it. And North Dakota was an example of this. And a reason for a lot of times antibiotics are abused just because the public is ignorant, doesn't know any better about how antibiotics are supposed to be used, or exactly what they're used for. And so the public's consumptions of antibiotics play a key role in the emergence and spread of antibiotic resistance. And so there was this study, and 1,800 adults were interviewed each month in England, Wales, and Scotland, and they were asked given these statements, and they were asked whether to disagree or agree. And on this table right here is the correct answers. And then if y'all want to pause it and read through that. And then on this next page is the results of the questions. And so the dark gray is the respondents that disagreed with a correct statement or agreed with a incorrect statement. And then the light gray is they just didn't really know. And so just to give you some numbers, 38% of the participants didn't know that the antibiotics are ineffective medicines for colds and coughs, and 43% didn't know that antibiotics kill the normal beneficial good bacteria on our skin and in our gut. And so obviously there's quite a bit of ignorance going on in this group of adults that were tested. And so there's been some campaigns and policies that are trying to increase public awareness of how to use antibiotics. It's called GARP, and it's Global Antibiotic Resistance Partnership. And they've been recently working with 8 countries to develop antibiotic resistance policies, and there's 6 strategies that are shown in the figure below. And the purpose of those strategies is to slow the resistance and then maintain the effectiveness of current drugs. And so, like I just talked about, maintaining the effectiveness of current drugs, that's one of the reasons they're trying to get those policies to work, because antibiotics have had to be modified. They've had to change to keep up with the evolution of bacteria. And an example I want to talk about was amoxicillin. And amoxicillin is a pretty generally well-known antibiotic. Lots of people have had it or know someone who have had it. And it's changed since it was first synthesized in the 1970s. And one of the ways that it has changed is it's had to be combined with different drugs to be as effective. You can see in that picture to the right there, it's been combined with clavute potassium, and that happened in the 1980s. And the clavonic acid increases the effect of the amoxicillin because it inhibits the development of beta-lactamase producing bacteria. And also increased doses, the recommended dose amount has had to be upped. In the chart down there, they've had to up the amount of how frequently they're taking the medicine. Even though these modifications are happening to become stronger for the medicine, there's still bacteria that are totally resistant to amoxicillin, and those are listed below: Staphylococcus epidermis, Staphylococcus aureus, and of course MRSA. Pharmaceutical companies they're working to create new antibiotics. That's quite a strenuous process. The FDA approval process is long. I was reading on their website, there's this 12-step long process outlined, and it costs billions of dollars and lots of years of research just to develop one new FDA-approved drug. And so the Human Genome Project, that resulted in a couple of new drugs. And it was in 2000 when the Human Genome Project was underway. And what was going on was it was a project to trace all of the human genetic code by determining the nucleotide sequence of base pairs that make up the human DNA. And so when the project was finished, it focused for a short while to predict genetic-based therapies and advances. And a couple of drugs came out of this, not a ton. The investments were kind of high. But another way that the genetic algorithms has a lot of potential for future creation of antibiotics. And they're these computer-generated algorithms that mimic real genes, and they make these virtual molecules, and they test them to see if they'll attach to their desired receptor. And they're kind of manipulated to represent antibiotics and bacteria and see what will work. And so I think that's promising, and there's a lot of potential for the genetic algorithms for pharmaceutical companies in the future. However, there has been a lack of interest from major pharmaceutical companies in antibiotics because it's not very profitable. It's not considered a wise investment for them because we think about it, antibiotics are only used for a short period of time. They cure the illness, so you're not dealing with chronic illnesses like diabetes that could potentially bring in lots of money, and antibiotics are cheap. And so out of 18 of the largest pharmaceutical companies, only 3 are remaining in the process to research antibiotics. This is pretty interesting. There's this group of people in the Amazon jungle in the mountains of Venezuela, and the Yanomami, their gut microbiota was studied, and they had a really high diversity of bacteria that we as industrialized Westerners did not have. And so their bacteria were studied, and they had a lot of parasites, but they didn't have any of the autoimmune disorders, elevated blood pressure, or heart diseases that we oftentimes in our industrialized societies experience. Something unique about this was they found these genes, 60 genes that could resist antibiotics. So this was pretty interesting because they were the Yanomami, they're not exposed to Western medicine and diet and lifestyle. And so these researchers were interested, how in the world could they have all these genes that could resist antibiotics? So they kind of came up with the idea that their gut bacteria already were able to adapt to various toxins in their environment without antibiotics. And so this study kind of suggested that it gives warning that antibiotics need to be used properly in our clinical and agricultural context, whatever we're using them for, and that we, as an industrialized society, the Western world, we have lost a lot of our necessary bacteria, and we need to learn how to restore them, and what we can learn to do from prevent from losing more. Another example research I was doing was the superbug, and it was in January of 2017, so pretty recent. This female in Reno, Nevada had been treated with 26 different types of antibiotics, and she was resistant to every single one. It was every antibiotic resistant in the US, and she passed away because they could not rid her body of this superbug, and there's a picture of it in that corner down there. So just some of my concluding thoughts about this. Living a healthy lifestyle and being cautious and knowledgeable about what medicine we're taking is a big part of how we can kind of hinder that process of antibiotic resistance. And then it's inevitable. We can't stop bacteria from evolving, but we can control the rates by supporting policies that will make sure antibiotics aren't abused, furthering the education of the public. And the pharmaceutical companies are a big part. They need to keep coming up with research ways that mimic evolutionary processes, so they can, be one step ahead of bacteria and come up with drugs that will help us. And they also need to gain a renewed interest and join in the creation of antibiotics and get on board to help fight bacteria. So I hope you all enjoyed my presentation, and there are my references that are continued, and thank you all very much.